yet today it makes sense with the understanding of our economic condition and the control of the major banking cartels throughout the world that controls everything we do. It's interesting to me that today, educationally, we as a people are much wiser today about the concept of a new world order and what they're doing to our individual liberties and freedom, that I think it's a fantastic time to be living just to see the changes and the understanding that the people have that they didn't have 10 years ago.
Wayne Paul, you're in the Obama deception. I interviewed you up at an In the Fed rally that it later came out the Army was watching because we're such evil Americans that want to get these foreign banks off our backs. And you talked about how the bankers took over, the War Powers Act, what Social Security really is, how the bankers are able to violate the Constitution and Bill of Rights. Break it down in more detail here on the air today, exactly what we're facing and how our form of government, our republic, really got overthrown back in 1933.
Well, it really goes back further than 1933. It goes back to 1913 when the Federal Reserve Act was first passed. When that happened, the Congress, in effect, gave up our liberties as it relates to our rights to banking and our rights to exchange property for services. And it took only 20 years from 1913 to 1933 before our federal government was bankrupt. They spent more money and borrowed more money from the Federal Reserve in the first 20 years of the Reserve's existence that in 1933, Roosevelt declared the United States was bankrupt. So since that time, it's the Federal Reserve banking cartel that has manipulated or controlled whatever they saw fit for our economy and our life. And it's taken from 1933 to present for those of us who have been studying and researching this come to understand and are able to teach it to other people. So we now have to start that change. Now, one of the changes that's going on dramatically right now are the various states that are passing state laws as it relates to banking, as it relates to gun control, as it relates to carrying firearms. And they're saying to the federal government, constitutionally, you can't come into this state and tell us whether we can have a gun or not. And you can't come into this state and tell us that if we bank within the state, we don't have to be under the federal regulations. All these things are exciting in terms of the changes that are taking place today.
Well, expanding on that, you're absolutely right. But 1933 was when they were able to bankrupt us and bring us into emergency rule. 1913 was when they got their beachhead. And then just a few years later, they were able to bring us into receivership. Then they issued the Social Security card that was literally the debt servant system. And that's when they began making us their dependents and expanding it. And so we've been under their system since 33 completely, under their thumb since 33. And all we've seen since then is a progression of social engineering, booms and bust, as the banks mass more and more power. And now they brag that they've gotten more power out of the banker bailout. They're establishing a bank of the world, a global constitution. We'll pay our carbon taxes to the bankers. They admit this is meant to shut down competition, vertically consolidate and integrate the economy into a worldwide monopoly controlled by this cartel. And you're right. The states are waking up. The people are waking up. We've never seen such an awakening. It's passed the House. Your brother's bill, Congressman Ron Paul, who joined us yesterday, to audit the private Federal Reserve. But I believe they're going to strike back. And I believe they're going to do that, Wayne, through staging crises and staging wars and staging terror attacks to be blamed on the Tea Parties and the In the Fed groups. What's your take on that?
Well, that you bring that up, because if you look at our gubernatorial race here in Texas alone, and when the minority staunch Texan was running against the two incumbents, she was put on a show, and the first thing the guy said is, "Are you a believer, are you a truther as it relates to 9/11? Unfortunately, that didn't have anything to do with the race in Texas, but it was used to make her look bad. But the truth be known that whether it's 9/11, whether it's the killing that took place in Waco, Ruby Ridge, all of these are suspect as a basis to eliminate a little more of our freedom. You know, now you almost have to go through a complete body cavity search to get on an airplane. And that's pretty demeaning in my opinion, and it's pretty taking away a lot of my privacy. And as a person handicapped that has a hard time standing, going through a security line and having to stand there not being able to touch anything is really demeaning to me.
Did you see the report of the boy that couldn't even walk? He was 4. He was in leg braces. He couldn't walk more than just a few feet. They had just gotten him in that last month to be able to walk a few feet in a wheelchair. They made him get out of the wheelchair without his parents' help and go through the metal detector while he was crying. It's all an act of submission, recording our naked body because somebody might do something. We're all guilty now.
That's correct. And I think we're going to see more and more of that kind of thing as, quote, a deterrent to terrorism, and it's only going to take more and more of the freedom from us. And they're doing that gradually, and they're also doing that in terms of taking our financial freedoms away from us.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because they're raising taxes on every level. Police have been caught with quotas that are illegal all over the country. And they're just building up this police state to forcibly extract this from us. And I agree with you. Regardless of whether terror in each case is real or staged or not, it's being focused on the average free person as a pretext to take our rights, as the Homeland Security documents showed last year. Wayne Paul, stay with us.
You're the devil.
Well, our predictions borne out. Glenn Beck's gone wild, saying a 9/11 truther shot the people at the Pentagon, with no evidence of it other than some message board stuff. Here they are from last night. September 11th, conspiracy theorist opens fire at Pentagon. Why are they so scared of people that talk about staged events? But we're getting into that in the next hour after Wayne Paul leaves us. Wayne is a CPA. He's been battling the IRS, exposing their activities for years. Whether you think the income tax is constitutional or not, what we know isn't constitutional is their treatment of people. No due process, their own special courts, seizing things just because they feel like it, just like the family court. We know they violate the Constitution and Bill of Rights every day. We know they drive people into suicide, into desperation. Most people that own businesses can't pay all these taxes or they'd go under. Wayne Paul, you've been battling these guys for years. You were talking about financial tyranny as we went to break. Talk about that now.
Well, one of the quick things I would like to point out is that last year, the government, in their infinite wisdom, decreased the withholding tax tables that employers had to withhold money from the employees to send to the government. And they said, here, we're going to give you a break. The problem with that is they never changed the tax rate for the year as it relates to the tax return.